Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new video. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about China's SWIFT equivalent system called the CIPS, and I'm also going to be talking about the world reserve currency, which is the dollar, and why it's going to be going down over the next few years. So before I start, just going to talk my usual gibberish at the start of the video. Don't forget to like and share, subscribe if you can. And also make sure you comment. I love reading your comments and I'll try and respond to each and every one of you. So I really appreciate that. And if you really want to support me and you really want to support the channel and help me grow, you're welcome to join my Patreon. And also you can buy me a coffee as well. I think my Patreon number is 45 now, so let's get it up to 50. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. So before I talk about the Chinese CIPS system, I want to talk about the dollar. So the dollar is a global currency. It's the world's reserve currency. It's the main currency that everybody uses to trade. Not everybody, but most of the countries around the world. I believe it's over 60%. And most of the oil and gas that gets transferred around the world, especially sold by Saudi Arabia and some of the Middle East countries, the oil gets sold in dollars, so that's where the petrodollar has come from. So most of the world uses dollars to buy oil and gas and things like that. Because the dollar is the world reserve currency, it gives the United States a lot of flexibility, leeway, and a lot of power, not just in military terms, but also financial power as well. So they can isolate a country and place sanctions upon a country and destroy its economy just by using sanctions. So that's where the financial power comes in. So the dollar being the world's reserve currency, the United States gets a lot of benefits that a lot of other countries don't. The United States can go into a trade deficit or even a balance deficit, and it does not need to worry. All it has to do is print more dollars. Any other country that goes into trade deficit or balance deficit, then they are in big trouble. While in the past the dollar was secured using gold, nowadays the dollar doesn't need to do that because it's the reserve currency. And the reserve currency basically allows USA to go into deficit and they can print unlimited supply of money. So when you are a country which is not the United States and you print an unlimited supply of money, a couple of things that's going to happen. You're going to have a hyperinflation and your money is going to be pretty much worthless. You will have a situation like Zimbabwe where it takes trillions of dollars just to buy a loaf of bread. Your currency is going to be so devalued that you cannot import any more goods because the import is going to be so expensive compared to your currency. So this is what happens to a country when it prints too much money. And luckily for America, it does not have that problem. They print as much money as they want, and what they do, they share the inflation with the rest of the world. And that's what's been happening over the past, few decades. They've been sharing the dollar all across the world and sharing the inflation across the world as well. So the dollar is not secured with gold like it was previously. That gives US plenty of room to have trillions and trillions of debt, and again they don't really have any limits. They can pretty much go on printing money as long as they want, only if the dollar stays as a reserve currency. And one of the other advantages of having the dollar as a reserve currency, it's not secured with any gold or anything like that. So it's basically like an IOU. The US is buying goods from abroad, like China, for example. It's 600, 700 trillion in deficit at the moment, and it's buying it in dollar. So if you think about it, the dollar is just like an IOU. It's basically a piece of paper saying I owe you this much. And America is going around spreading this IOU notes all across the world. So what it is they're buying goods and services from all over the world, whether it's raw materials, oil, gas, goods from China. And all they're doing is giving a piece of paper saying I owe you this much. And what these countries can do, they've got a couple of options. What they do is they change the currency to their local currency. And what banks do is they have US dollars, and they can buy US bonds, they can buy US treasuries, or they can go and invest in USA, and they can invest in stocks and shares and other things. So that's what's happening with the dollar at the moment. So as it works, USA does not have to pay its debts. So the piece of paper, the IUU that USA is spreading all over the world, it does not have to pay back. All America will do is print more money, print more dollars, and say, look, we're the reserve currency, our currency is stable, our word is as good as our dollar. So the USA can spread the dollar around the world as much as it can, and it can do these things around the world as long as the dollar is the reserve currency and as long as the dollar doesn't crash. This is why the United States will try and protect the dollar at all costs. So when I say at all costs, everything's on the table, whether it's down using financial sanctions or whether it's a military action as well. And a lot of wars that the Americans have started over the years wasn't based on human rights or anything that they tell you. It was mainly down to the dollar. So Saddam Hussein basically wanted to move away from the dollar when he was selling oil, and that's one of the reasons he fell out of favor with the Americans. And the same thing happened to Colonel Gaddafi of Libya. He wanted to move away from using dollars when selling oil and gas, and look what happened to him. So a lot of the wars around the world wasn't just about human rights, wasn't about all of these stories that the Americans have made up about Iraq and weapons of mass destruction and things like that. It was all down to protecting the dollar. Any country that dares to move away from the dollar usually gets America's wrath. And you can see by the countries that America has sanctioned all across the world, each and every one of them are moving away from the dollar or have tried to move away from the dollar or in the process of doing so. They have also weaponized the dollar, and they have sanctioned any country that dares to move away from the dollar, or they have sanctioned any countries that they do not like. USA have been putting countries in a debt trap, and I know China's been accused of putting countries in a debt trap, but USA is the number one debt trap for any country. Once a country is in debt to America, America is able to control how that country is run and control its resources and financial systems, and they can control that country up to a point. They can choose their leader, and they can also take away all the money and resources from that country and keep it down. So you can see how America's been keeping down a lot of countries around the world, places like Russia, and now they're trying to do to China. But they've also been succeeding in South America, and look how poor some of these South American countries are. If any of these countries in South America were very rich and very powerful, then that would be dangerous for United States. So for United States to project its power around the world, it needs to make sure all the countries around the world are subservient to it, and make sure these countries do not get strong and have their own identity or something that will compete with the United States. And look at Japan. Japan in the 80s and 90s was very, very powerful. Its economy was shooting up, and Japan was a huge danger to the United States. So what the United States did, they came up with something called the Plaza Accord, and they forced Japan to sign it. And since they signed it, Japan's economy has been on a slump, and it's not been growing for the past 10 years or maybe more. They have done it to the Middle East. They have literally bombed nearly every country in the Middle East to smithereens. They have done it to Europe. Because of the United States, Europe now has to buy expensive gas, LNG gas from America. They've managed to keep Germany down. Germany now will not be competitive compared to China and other countries because it has to buy very expensive gas and oil, mainly from the United States. They have forced Germany to cancel Nord Stream 2, and America has pretty much achieved what they wanted. Europe will be very, very uncompetitive from now because they have to buy very expensive stuff compared to cheap gas through pipelines from Russia. So America has got what he wanted. It's cancelled Nord Stream 2. It's kept Europe down. It's kept Germany down. And German's industry is going to be very, very uncompetitive compared to American industries and as well as Chinese industries or Southeast Asia. So if America likes you, you are trading with them, you are buying a lot of their goods, buying their military, you are following their rules-based order, then they will basically support you. They will call you a democracy when you are not a democracy. I'm talking about Ukraine, by the way. And they will ignore any human rights abuses. I'm also talking about Ukraine. I'm talking about India, Israel, Saudi Arabia. The list goes on. If they like you, they will support you. There's no human rights violations. You're a democracy. But if they don't like you, they will make sure you are isolated from the global system, global financial system. They will get their allies to sanction you. They will sanction you themselves. And they will make up lies. They will say there's human rights abuses when there isn't. They will start making up lies, say there's lab leaks. They will say there's genocide going on in Xinjiang, for example. They will make up a lot of lies just to destabilize a country. They will focus on doing color revolutions like they've done on Ukraine and tried to do recently on Kazakhstan. They will support riots like in Hong Kong, for example. So if USA is your enemy, they will be the worst enemy. They will try and destabilize you. They will try and isolate you. They will try to go for regime change. They will do everything in their book to get someone else into power and become their puppet. Only if you are not their puppet. So they will find someone who is. So if you try and seek independence from the USA, they will try and destroy you, basically. So one of the main reasons America tries to spread democracy around the whole world is because if you are a leader of a country and you don't follow America's orders, you don't follow their rules-based order, you don't open up your country to their businesses, you don't open up your financial system to their businesses so they can take some money out or take all the money out, then they will replace you with a puppet, somebody who can, and they will give your adversary all the money, resources and power to win the next general election. And this is why they spread democracy around the world, because if you are not going to be their puppet, they will find someone and give that person whatever resources they need to win. And there's a lot of organizations that USA has. One of the most famous ones is the NED, National Endowment for Democracy. And that in itself goes around the world and it says it spreads democracy, but what it's all about is regime change. However, it's much harder for regime change to happen in a one-party system or a dictatorship or a communist country, for example. So this is why they like to spread democracy around the world, because that gives America all the power, and if they don't like you, they'll replace you with somebody else. But if you're a dictator, or if you're in a communist country, or you're in a one-party system, it's a lot harder for them to do that. So that's why they want countries to move away from that. Since the 1950s, the USA has always been in deficit, and this deficit is growing year by year. Any other country that has deficits, you will need to borrow a loan from the IMF, putting you further and further in debt and to be controlled by the United States. These countries are then forced to sell their natural resources to the United States, forced to buy goods from the USA and allow US businesses to flood the country and force it to open its financial system so USA can take their wealth as well. So if you don't do that, then sanctions are placed, and basically everyone knows sanctions don't just affect the country, they affect the people as well, so everyone gets affected. So where does China come into all of this? As you know, USA has got a huge deficit with China, And when Trump came into power, he did not like that, and he started having a trade war with China, starts putting all sorts of tariffs on China. So what does China have to do with all of these dollars, and what is it doing with all of these dollars that China is making from the USA? Well, let me explain. So the Chinese are basically selling goods, cheap goods to the USA, and they are buying it in dollars. So these dollars basically go into their Belt and Road scheme, they go into infrastructure, and they're spreading the infrastructure around the world, and they're using basically treasuries and bonds, stocks and shares, but mainly all of it's been used on building infrastructure, but not just in China, but also in the Belt and Road scheme. So they're using all of the dollars that they have in the Belt and Road scheme, and basically they're dumping all of the dollars in that scheme. What this means is if the dollar ever crashes, China does not fall with the Americans. So they're trying to sell as much of this US dollars as they can, or trying to get rid of it as much as they can. And the only ways they can get rid of it is building infrastructure, while Americans are buying cheap goods from China. So in return, China is the one that's winning because they are building infrastructure, while Americans are basically getting cheap goods and they eventually go to the bin. So one of the things that Russia's been doing for many years, for about 8 years, they've been going away from the dollar as well. They also have been dumping the dollar, and China and Russia have been buying a lot of gold as well to compensate, and they have also been trading goods with each other and other countries with their own currency. So this chart shows you the world's reserve currencies. Starts from 2002 going into 2020, and you can see from 2002 the US dollar was 66.5%, and each year as it going down, you can see each year is going down further and further and further, and it's come down to 59.0% in 2020, and even 2021 it's gone down even further. The euro is going up, and one of the main drivers is the Chinese renminbi as well, so that's going up. As the Chinese economy grows, Chinese RMB is going to be much more international. It's going to grow very, very sharply over the next few years, and you can see the way that a lot of these BRI schemes and Belt and Road schemes are coming into fruition now. So China will start trading in their own currency with a lot of these Central Asian countries, even Europe and even Africa and Southeast Asia as part of the RCEP. And you will see a lot of countries start using their own currency. You will see Chinese RMB shooting straight up. And also one of the things is China will trade with Russia with their own currencies as well, especially when it comes to oil and gas. And because Russia won't have many other customers apart from Europe, Russia will focus on China, and China will focus on Russia, as well as its raw materials and raw goods as well. So I can see the Chinese yuan shooting up, and that's going to take more of a share from the US dollar, and I can see US dollar percentage going down. And a lot of countries which can't decide whether to use their own currencies or whether they want to use the dollar or the euro, I believe a lot of countries will start using the euro as well. And the euro, in fact, has the next best chance of becoming the world reserve currency. As the dollar shoots down in value, I believe more and more people will start using the euro, and I believe euro will start shooting up. And euro is at the best place at the moment to take over the world's reserve currency. So what is the CIPS, the cross-border interbank payment system? So it was launched in October 2015, and it hasn't really been used as much. They've been doing a lot of testing over the years, And slowly more and more banks are starting to use it as an alternative to SWIFT. However, this year there's a lot of tension on the CIPS system, mainly because of all of the sanctions that have been placed on Russia. So people are asking, what is Russia going to use instead of SWIFT? Well, this is the system they will use. So a little bit about it. It's based in Shanghai and has a registered capital worth of 2.3 billion won, which is 376.9 million US dollars, and that's going to be rising over the next year or so. It's overseen by the People's Bank of China, and to use this system you have to use the Chinese RMB or the Chinese yuan, and this is the only way that you can use this system. And it's good for countries that are sanctioned, countries like Iran, Russia, for example. That means America will not know where a lot of this money gets transferred around the world. They will lose track of a lot of money around the world if more and more countries use this system. So a couple of advantages: because you have to use the Chinese RMB for this, that's why the Chinese RMB will start growing internationally as more and more countries use this. And this year I can see the CIP system really take charge, because they are forced, because of the sanctions to Russia, to use this system more and more. And you can see more and more people being employed to use this system, and this system growing more and more, and more money will be transferred via this system. And the bad news is, because it's not going via SWIFT, America will not know a lot of transactions around the world, and it will lose track of most transactions around the world. And any country that wants to be independent from the SWIFT, or doesn't want America to track their funds, can use this system instead. I believe this year the CIPS system will completely explode. More and more countries will start using it. And there's also stories that the CIPS system is based on the SWIFT system, and both systems work hand in hand and they work together. And there are also rumors that the CIPS system uses SWIFT as well. So even if you use CIPS, SWIFT will keep a record of it. Some of it is true. I believe this was all part of CIPS testing, and when they were rolling it out, it was part of SWIFT. But they can switch that SWIFT part off any point, any moment in time. It was all done while they were testing and rolling it out. But it's completely independent from SWIFT, and they do not need SWIFT for this. All they need is banks signing up to this to use this system. It's a very new system. It's hardly been used, but it's going to start shooting up once Russia starts using it. So you can see it was only used 3.2% of the global payments in January. But as you know, the war started in February time, so this will start shooting up from now. And also, CIPS reported 2.68 million transactions in the first 11 months of last year. Again, this is not a big number compared to what SWIFT does. However, this was all before the war started. So let's have a look at these figures after 6 months or maybe like a year, and then we can really see how CIPS is doing. So how is this doing right now? So you got all of the standard banks which have joined, some standard major banks. You got HSBC, Citibank, Deutsche Bank. And in January this year, the system had 1,280 users across 103 countries, including 75 directly participating banks and 1,205 indirect participants. So it's a growing system, and it's going to be used more and more, especially now after the year. So like I said, let's have a look at this 6 months from now and see how it's doing. So what's the future? As you can see from this line here, Chinese analysts believe sanctions on Russian banks will be a wake-up call for Beijing. So they know that all of these sanctions that have been placed on Russia, and Russia's been completely isolated from the West. The same thing could happen to the Chinese if there's a conflict in the Taiwanese Strait, for example. So China will need to prepare for that, and I believe they will fast-track the development of CIPS right now, and I'm sure they will be right now as we speak, they'll be pushing it out to more and more banks and more countries. So you can see here, swift sanctions on Iran and Russia. Don't forget Venezuela as well. Both important oil producing nations, could accelerate the decline of the petrodollar system and facilitate the yuan internationalization. And I can see them really pushing this out this year. We hope to provide services all around the globe one day, and especially to facilitate services to overseas participants. So I don't think they realize the seriousness of how much Russia has been sanctioned. And again, China could be next if ever there's war on the Taiwanese Strait, and China would be heavily affected by swift sanctions, because China sells goods all over the world, and it's very much the factory of the world, and nearly every single one of those countries uses SWIFT. And so China would be deeply affected if the same sort of sanctions hit China. So China will start to fast track this and make sure they are not dependent on SWIFT. There is also something called the digital yuan as well, which China is testing at the moment. This is not out yet. They actually are looking to release it internationally around 2024. But again, they might fast track this and try to do it sooner. The digital yuan works with the CIPS. They both work with each other. And once the digital yuan comes out, it'll be a lot harder for America to trace money that goes around the world, because this will be secured using blockchains, and it's basically going to be digital, and it's going to be very difficult to track by SWIFT or by any other means. And once this comes out internationally, China will force a lot of countries to use this system when buying their goods, whether it's transport, anyone that's using the BRI, so they'll be transporting goods all over the world using the BRI. Any transit countries, they'll be forced to use a digital yuan, as well as any countries that want to trade with China. And I think once this comes into effect, you will see a really sharp increase in internationalization of the Chinese RMB, and they will be a huge competitor to the dollar as well as the euro. I personally do not think that China is looking to become the next reserve currency or the next world reserve currency. I believe it's going to be the euro, and I think China is going to be the second world reserve currency. The dollar is going to come down fast over the next few years, and I think the sanctions placed on Russia has been a wake-up call, not only for China but for the rest of the world. And every single world will be thinking, oh my god, we could be next if we don't listen to America, or if we don't follow their rules. We could be completely shut out from the SWIFT system. So a lot of companies and a lot of countries even will try and move away from the SWIFT, and will try and move away from the dollar. And I can see the dollar crashing over the next few years. And already Saudi Arabia is looking to buy goods from China and sell oil to China with their own currency, which is the RMB, and that is going to be a huge impact to the dollar as well. What we are seeing is the beginning of the end, and the dollar will crash in soon over the next few years, and people will look back at this moment and see when the dollar started crashing, and they will look at the sanctions that they placed on Russia, and that's made the rest of the world wake up, and the rest of the world will start to move and accelerate away from the dollar. And already a lot of countries are doing that so far, and we will see by the end of this year or maybe the end of next year how the dollar reserve currency is doing. So this is enough from me today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope it was quite educational. Let me know if you have any questions. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you go into the comment section, I love reading your comments as well. And if you really want to support the channel, and if you really want to support me, then don't forget to join my Patreon or buy me a coffee. Thanks very much, and I'll see you in the next video.